Hey everyone! In this episode of In Conversation, in partnership with the 2024 Dubai ITS World Congress, I'm joined by the UK manager of Acusensus, Geoff Collins, really well-known individual across the ITS industry. Anyway, I'm Alistair and this is at ITS Now. ITS Now produces learning resources about ITS which are often used by new entrants into the sector. It would therefore be interesting to learn a little about your career background and how you became such an influential ITS professional.
Okay, well, I think like a lot of ITS professionals that I've spoken to, it didn't start out as my initial intended career path. Something I largely drifted into. So I studied engineering at university, and I went to work in the manufacturing sector where I worked with machine vision systems. So cameras being used to monitor production, measuring, guiding things, determining if something was wrong. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. And so I worked for a number of years evaluating applications within manufacturing industry, trying to determine where there was a problem and thinking about how computer vision, machine vision could be used to actually address it. So I did that for a number of years. And then there was a time when I was becoming a little bit tired of doing that type of things. And I was approached by an organization that had just developed the first ever average speed system, which in some ways is similar to manufacturing in that you have a camera that looks at things that travel underneath it, rather than having a camera that was looking at a conveyor belt. And that was my opportunity to move from one market sector to another. And it very much appealed to me to do something that was similar but different, but would actually have a really good positive outcome on the world, because I was trying to make things better and make sure that more people got home each evening. So that was kind of how I drifted into the ITS sector maybe 20 years ago, and I haven't looked back since then.
Fantastic. Yeah, I am, in a similar vein. I ended up in ITS through different jobs rather than actively seeking out the sector, and I think that is quite a theme amongst a lot of people that I know in the industry. They've come in one way or another, but once people are here, they tend to stay for quite a long time. It's interesting in that way. So you're very much a recognised figure in the enforcement segment as a consequence to that, and you've really been at the forefront of some major innovations, as you said, about average speed, and now with the new developments with Acusensus. But I wonder if you're frustrated by the inertia surrounding the adoption of technologies to make our roads safer.
Yeah, I think it's true to say that there's definitely some frustration, because we're trying to do really important things. And if you feel you can make the world a better place and make sure that people are safe, you want to get on with it. You don't want to be held up by bureaucracy and challenges. And that is a part of it, because I fear that road safety in particular on the ITS scale is at the not very sexy end. It's at the end which doesn't necessarily get a huge amount of attention, and few people say that is going to be my number one priority, to make things a little bit slower, to make things a little bit safer, to maybe make things a little bit quieter. Usually I think the concept of ITS that people are excited by is doing more things better, faster, getting there really quickly, as opposed to maybe slowing it down. But not to say that it is a very rewarding way to do things. And what I've learned is that you have to try and work with the complicated stakeholder map in order to get where you want to go, because it is quite hard to get government, to get politicians, to get local authorities, national authorities, police authorities, and the Home Office to do things quickly and to move in the direction that you want them to. But when you do achieve it, it's very rewarding and you can make really noticeable, tangible differences. So we do get there, but I do get frustrated by it.
Do you think that there is scope for a simplification of the compliance requirements, such as Home Office approval, or for enforcement products, or even with national highways, the requirements for Code of Connection, COCO as it's known in short, can be very onerous, and we were to simplify those processes. Do you think it would make quicker routes to market to stimulate innovation?
The short answer is yes. All of these regulations and the controls and the compliance that are being put in place, both for things like Home Office type approval and for codes of connection, I believe they're initially put in there for very good reason.
Yes.
Because you can't just allow a natural dynamic market to take place when it's safety critical. In particular, it has to be controlled and regulated. And particularly when it comes to something like Home Office type approval, the level of scrutiny that will be thrown at something, if let's say a wealthy motorist decides they want to buy their way out of trouble, there will be a huge amount of scrutiny on the way things have been done and prepared. So understandably, there's a high level of control. But I fear that in both of the examples you talk about there, we've drifted into a situation where things have just got more and more complicated. The requirements are greater, and that just makes things slow down, and they move much more slowly. And the nature of technology is to throw more things at you and get quicker and move faster. So if regulation is slowing down and the rate of change of the technology capability is going up, you get to a point when there's an imbalance. And so I know with Home Office type approval, it's being reviewed at the moment, the way the process is going to work.
Yes.
And I do believe that if it's done properly, then it will be better for everybody, because we'll be able to bring new concepts, new ideas, totally new ways of doing a similar thing to market, and we'll get there quicker. But we do have to take into account the reason that the regulation was there before. So I wonder if maybe the best thing to do is almost start again and think, I want an outcome-driven approach. What do we need, rather than tweaking and making things a little bit different. But it would be nice to get there quicker, because there are tools out there which could very rapidly make the transport network better and safer.
Yeah, I think the Home Office type approval in particular, if you have issues with particular components in your equipment become obsolete, and that's been an increasing problem within the manufacturing sector in recent years, that you then have to go back through HOTA again.
Yeah.
So we're talking around the ITS World Congress that we're supporting, and there are the main themes for that for the 2024 ITS World Congress in Dubai are mobility driven by ITS, and they have themes: urban mobility, innovation in mobility and logistics, clean mobility, and automated mobility. And I just wondered if you consider if any of those provide the biggest opportunities for progress over the next decade.
Of the themes for the World Congress, I think it was the innovation in mobility and logistics that stands out to me as being personally where I think there's the greatest opportunity for progress. Because while it is important for urban mobility, not everybody lives in a city, whereas the whole reason for ITS is to move people and things where they need to be, when they need to be there, in a safe way, in an environmentally friendly way. And I think that is the greatest opportunity and where there's the most room to go, because I think the way some of these things will be happening in 10 years, we've got no idea of at all at the moment how it's going to be done.
No.
Whereas everybody immediately jumps onto connected and autonomous vehicles, particularly autonomous vehicles, and hey, let's have flying cars as well. And they have always, in my professional experience, been just under 10 years away. and I'm going back 20 years here.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, in terms of particularly mobility and logistics, that is where there's so much more is going to happen and is going to come, because that impacts everybody, that literally everybody, not just people who live in the home counties in England, but internationally, globally. I think that's where there's going to be the widest reaching opportunity.
Ultimately, everyone consumes or sells things that are transported one way or another.
Remember to hit subscribe for ITS now.
Within our profession, we talk about all these cutting edge technologies and all these exciting opportunities, but there is definitely an aging demographic in many areas of ITS. So I just wonder how we could make it more attractive to younger people, and also to increase the ethnic, cultural and gender diversity of those working in the sector.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I don't think anyone has the complete answer for that one, but I found myself thinking about what ITS role models are there, and particularly what ITS role models are there in fiction or in TV and film.
Okay.
And you really have to think about it, because they don't jump out at you. And unfortunately, the one that did jump out at me was Professor Peach from The Italian Job.
But Benny Hill.
Benny Hill. And
yes.
If you remember some of the character traits he had, they are not things that we're looking for.
No.
So I say that in jest, but there aren't really very many relatable media type role models when it comes to ITS. And maybe that ties into why, in a different way, you and I back in the day didn't think about ITS. It didn't appear on our radar. And arguably, it's very much going to be the same for a young professional starting out on their career now. People don't think about how it is they get from A to B, what keeps them safe, what's the underlying data management that means that the thing they ordered yesterday evening is going to arrive by 10:22 at a very specific address tomorrow.
Yes.
And I wonder if there's a way that we can try to get people amazed by that, because the way data is used to achieve that, it's not something that's niche and only happens in 3 factories around the world. This is something that's happening everywhere, every day, regardless of where you live. So trying to get a little bit of the energy and the magic of that, I think getting people thinking about it, I would like to think it would make people want to do more, because I think if you try and talk about transportation, intelligent transportation to people, they probably think about being a train driver or wanting to fly an aeroplane, but those are not really comparable, and particularly today, because many of these things are going to be automated. So it's the glue in the middle that brings these things together, which is, you and I will find exciting, and I would like to think anyone watching this podcast will think it is exciting, but it's trying to get other people to appreciate that and take it on board.
It is difficult, I think. We, like many engineering type disciplines, suffer from poor level of communications to those either in other engineering disciplines, client groups and the general public generally. And that's part of the ethos of this channel, is to try and communicate in plain language all sorts of different concepts and capabilities of ITS, so that people can become engaged with it. But I also think there's a lot we can do within the education space, but we'll come to that in a little bit as well. But the Italian Job has been the bane of my sort of professional life for many years, because people think they can override traffic signal controllers in certain ways, and you may be able to do that in some countries, but I always point out that actually those particular things, particularly in the newer version, you can't achieve in the UK. So
but the positive thing to draw from that is that it shows how absolutely critical it is that this is done properly and right and securely. But if you do a job really, really well, people often don't notice, do they? It tends to be the jobs done not so well which get noticed. And maybe that is part of our self-conceived problem, is that we are doing our job in such an efficient way that people actually don't pick up on it. If only we could do the potholes, then everything will be fine.
Yes, definitely, definitely. So maybe part of that, I was going to talk a bit about artificial intelligence, but we're seeing a huge increase in the use of AI within ITS applications, and this obviously provides some really exciting opportunities, including the systems your company Acusensus has in the enforcement segment. But are there any applications which have either surprised or frightened you about AI's use in mobility applications?
Well, artificial intelligence, the two letters really jump out at people, and it can set the hairs running in all kinds of different directions.
Yes.
To my mind, AI is simply a labor-saving tool that means that you can get a system to look at huge amounts of data and just be far more reliable and consistent and do the same thing time after time. And your question about have I seen any scary ones is interesting, because the only scary stuff that I genuinely have seen is where people start joining the dots into something that it's not. And then we've got really good films like Terminator and The Matrix that people immediately focus in on, and we're on the first step towards that. And it's scary how people then start joining the dots, because one of the reasons we arguably dominate the planet, or we dominate the planet, is because we've evolved into what we are. And part of evolution is being scared of things that you don't quite understand. And I think that's what's going on with AI. We genuinely don't quite understand what it is, where it's going to go, and how it's going to change things. So we are wary and fearful, which is why there's so much good fiction that comes out around it. But people then extrapolate what's really happening. So with the cameras that I'm involved in, they're fantastically good at looking at hundreds of thousands of images and just offering up a few where something really dangerous and really bad that nobody wants is happening. But there's always a few people that then by association will think, well, that means it's probably tracking me and checking what I'm doing when I'm not driving past that camera. And you have to manage and understand that concern as well. So making sure the reason for doing something is right, the data is appropriately managed and handled so that everything can be done securely. But I myself haven't come across a real world practical AI application that I find scary, because the ones that come to light are the ones that are managed and controlled and are trying to do something appropriate. But that's not to say that there shouldn't be checks and balances, because the whole idea about putting open AI systems out for anybody to play with, I find that scary just as a general concept, but that is not being applied in ITS applications.
No, so look out for a video coming very soon, actually, on this channel called AI, It's Only a Tool. I think that explains some of those concepts and issues that you've just talked about. You talked about security, etc., but I think one of the issues that we have in the ITS sector is that there are a lot of practitioners who aren't IT professionals. So is there a danger that aspects like cyber security or user confidentiality could be put at risk because of a lack of understanding of those sorts of issues?
That is definitely something to be aware of and keep an eye on, because the rate of change with the way data is gathered, it is almost out of our control. And so people who are very specialist in a certain area, and many people who work in the ITS sector, they come into the ITS sector, they stay in the ITS sector, they get a real level of expertise around that field. But then suddenly we have big data management and data security comes into it. So whereas before you might have been looking at a closed set of data that related to 50,000 things which could happen purely with a fence around it, you're now looking at billions of bits of data which could be accessed from anywhere in the world in real time, And it's fair to say that the people that have maybe worked in a certain niche specialist area, they won't have the tools, the understanding, and the awareness of the wider impact. So it's very much a thing that we need to deal with. And it's not just a matter of upskilling the people who are currently doing something. I think it's a case of where we should be working more collaboratively with people who have the wider understanding. And then you've got a shared approach to it rather than someone that's not an expert practitioner making potentially very important decisions around something that they haven't had much experience of themselves.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting the different outlooks around this sort of topic area around the world. I've talked a few times about being very surprised by the attitudes of American colleagues in particular, who didn't really even understand about the concept of privacy, were surprised by things like GDPR in Europe, protecting people's rights to privacy. So that's something that we also need to be aware of, that although we may think that that is something that's been undertaken globally, actually there are quite a few places where that isn't a consideration, or in some places actually they're actively not maintaining that at all. So we just have to be mindful of those sorts of issues. We talked a little earlier touched on connected and automated vehicles. So we've talked a lot about how these will become commonplace in the next 5 to 10 years, but I think one of the items that really is starting to take off is connected vehicles. And do you think that might see a change to actually having on board compliance enforcement before we get to the presence of actually automated vehicles?
I think that's likely, and it's been said many times before, but connected and autonomous vehicles are always 8, 9, 10 years away. And I think a full fleet of autonomous vehicles on our network is much further away than that. We're a substantial way away. So the benefits of connectivity, connected system, V2X, V2V, there's some really good things which are going to happen there. And for the made up statistic, but for the 95% of people who generally want to do the right thing, when they have the benefit of connected vehicles and maybe on board the connected vehicle, either with a gentle shouldn't be doing that or a firmer you absolutely shouldn't be doing that, that will give you large levels of compliance. And by compliance I mean doing the right thing. I don't mean compliance in a bad way. If everybody does the right thing, everybody's okay. The challenge we have is the small percentage of people who actively know they're not doing the right thing and fully intend to not do the right thing, either because they get a kick from it or because they are actively trying to do bad things to other people. And no amount of on-board compliance or enforcement technology is going to help you when someone is actively set out to do the wrong thing. Whether it's using an autonomous vehicle to take something from one place to another, or whether it's making an autonomous vehicle or a connected vehicle appear to be something that it's not, so it's sending out the wrong information when it's actually doing something different, or whether they're just driving an old school 20th century analog vehicle which has virtually no digital signature. These people are going to be on the road network with people who want to do the right thing. And as a result, I think there will always be the need for some kind of a third party, second check evaluation, in addition to whatever form a police force will be in 5, 10, 15 years' time. So I think, yes, a lot of it will be done internally, but we are going to have to rely on some kind of oversight just to make sure that everything is right. And even a a very high specification connected and or autonomous vehicle can sometimes go wrong. And if it is not detecting that it is going wrong, something else needs to flag up the fact that there is a problem and to deal with it. So, yeah, I think we're never going to get away when it's to the point when it is just self-determining. There will always need to be something different.
There's some really good points in there, actually, Geoff. And I think, we do see issues where we have drivers intentionally driving on the wrong side of a motorway, etc., in order to, in an attempt to evade police and things like that. So, yeah, it's a very valid point. And with people up to all sorts of unscrupulous activities, I'm sure that is quite a big problem on the network, in fact. But it's not something that I think a lot of law-abiding motorists would actually ever comprehend. And maybe it's those sorts of points that we as an industry should be helping to broadcast, so that people have more understanding of not necessarily the primary use case for something, but all the added benefits that we're providing to them as users of our road network, as well as the public generally. I think that's a really interesting point.
Remember to hit subscribe for ITS now.
ITS and highways generally, the ITS sector in particular, we are really suffering from a skills shortage. We've seen that there's shortages in all sorts of different areas. So organisations like ITS UK and the Institute of Highway Engineers and others are all scrambling around the whole time trying to come up with innovations to encourage people into the sector. But I think one of the areas where we could do some good with this is to increase vocational training opportunities, degree apprenticeships and things like that. Have you got any thoughts around that area? Obviously ITS now is very much promoting educational content as well, but it's always interesting to get insight from others around this topic area.
Well, it ties into something I think we've already discussed as well, about the demographic of people who work professionally within ITS. It seems to move up each year. And should we talk about it in an echo chamber? And getting new people, younger people, different viewpoints, different backgrounds, different experiences and knowledge is absolutely key. And there is no, I don't think there's a silver bullet for it. But I think part of the thing is to try to engage more with people, to explain why it is so important. Because while many professions and areas of business will change beyond all recognition in the time, let's say someone that's 18 to 21 now and is setting out on their career, and if they're going to work in ITS now, their career may last for, well, up to 50 years. And the world of work in every field will have changed so much in that period. But there will always be an ITS sector. In 45 years' time, people will still need to get from A to B to C to D, and they will still want the things that they want, where they want it, when they want it. And so this is something where if you get into it and you understand it and you have an engagement with it, you've got a career for life, and an interesting career for life that will dynamically change. How we get that across to people and make them want to come on board, that is the more tricky. That is the more tricky element, but it's down to everybody. And I completely agree that if you can get an 18-year-old to come on board and undertake a degree level apprenticeship and build up those skills from day one, then you've got someone arguably for life that's going to work in that area, rather than waiting for people to drift in their mid-30s when something else has changed. for
Yes.
example.
Yes. And I think another aspect of it is that it's a worldwide profession as well. So there are opportunities for people to work, to travel, to globally. So it can be really exciting to go and experience what's happening in other areas. Your company is based in Australia, for example, isn't it? So there's a lot of ties between highways in Australia and New Zealand and the UK, but also opportunities globally. And I think if we can promote those sorts of opportunities as well, then I make it look exciting, because it is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is, and you maybe realise there aren't many industries which are probably more globally interconnected than ITS. Quite literally, it is about connectivity, and a way of doing something well in one country almost certainly will work well in another country with some changes and modification. There are many consultants that are able to then base their career on the fact that they can take a good concept and roll it out in many different areas. And so, yeah, it is going to be trying to make people realise that there is something really good, interesting, engaging, exciting, allow you to see the world, do all kinds of things. But that's what we need to try and achieve.
And have you got any tips for particular areas of segments of ITS which might be a good area for growth and career opportunities for new entrants to the sector?
Well, I've tried thinking about this, and I fairly rapidly found myself tied up in knots, because obviously the monitoring and compliance sector is a wonderful sector which I've chosen to work in for a while. But realistically, no, I think it's quite a broad church, ITS. Depending from the outside, you might think it's niche, but
Yes.
it is a very broad church that joins together so many different things: big lumps of metal, small bits of data, and everything in between. And so now I think if an opportunity appeals to someone, that's what they should follow, rather than suggesting heading for just a particular part of it. And there are so many ways to get into it as well, through public sector authorities that actually run the operational large scale projects, and many of them are looking into interesting, innovative ways to do things, and I think there's opportunities to get involved there. Then of course there's consultants that share some of the knowledge and the understanding amongst the typically public sector suppliers. And then there's a huge body of technology experts that have come up with ideas or have existing ideas that they're looking to bring to market. So there are many different ways into the sector, and some will work for some people, some will work for others. But I would encourage anyone to look long and hard at it.
Yeah, some of the conversations I've been having have been around the fact that there are a lot of people working in tech startups, particularly in the mobility space, working in ITS, but they don't even know what ITS is, let alone know they're working within it. So I think we need to engage with those people as well in order to enrich ourselves and them as well, and learn a lot around it. And consultants, you mentioned. Having been a consultant and being a consultant still, I can highly recommend it. I think some of the consultancies provide some really good training opportunities for people right the way through their career. So I would certainly suggest people have a look at that sort of side. But as you say, there's lots of different opportunities, and there isn't a single route into the sector, because even within ITS there's a whole plethora of different career opportunities, different engineering disciplines, not just engineering, all sorts of things. And actually, probably from my own personal mindset, I always refer to it as an engineering discipline, but it's much more than that now. So maybe I need to learn something from that as well.
But from what you were saying then, it just made me think that within the space of a month earlier in the year, I went to 2 different trade shows, so real world face-to-face shows, and both of them were arguably ITS shows, but the feel was very, very different. One of them was a fairly traditional old school show, and there were lots of bits of metal barrier and a few traffic signals, and it just seemed quite slow moving, quiet and predictable. And then the other one was very much a future mobility event,
Yes.
and very much overlap, but it had a totally different vibe about
Yes.
it, completely different feel, far more energetic. And there were a lot more people wearing trainers and jeans, walking
Yes.
around and
Yes.
drinking expensive coffees, but it overlapped, but these 2 worlds felt like they were apart. So
Yes.
I think there's a branding and an understanding thing where if we can bring those things together, and you can bring some of the trendy coffees over to the people wearing the tight-fitting polo shirt, then you've maybe got the best of both worlds.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So, thank you so much, Geoff. That was really good of you to join us. It's been really interesting to have a conversation around that, and I look forward to seeing what you and Acusensus get up to in the coming years. That would be fantastic.
As do I, and thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. I hope you found that interesting. We've got more episodes of our In Conversation series coming up on the ITS Now channel, official media partner of the 2024 Dubai ITS World Congress. So make sure you don't miss out on any of these insightful episodes we've got lined up for you. So lastly, can I please ask you to subscribe to our channel? It's free, it doesn't cost you anything, but it really makes a huge difference to us, helping to bring more episodes about ITS to you. Thanks again to everyone who has already subscribed. Thanks for watching. See you next time.